Today, we're going to talk complicated. It's complicated. Something that I kind of avoid talking too much about because it's complicated. Organics. Dark area. Most people don't understand the concept of organics versus the inorganics. It's complex. But when it comes to organics, the king of organics, the king, guano, tops. The potency in guano is just wow. Like that's one of the big factors. It was the agricultural product for centuries. It was harvested all over the world. It's what fed the world up until they started creating fertilizer out of oil, which long term is creating most of the problems of feeding the world as fast as it's feeding the world. But we're going to deal with guano and organics. Now, this one here, let's do this one. Guano. There's Seabird Guano and bat guano. Those are the two really the king. That's the one we deal with at Way to Grow. Now, we get Seabird. You bring this stuff from, there's all over the world. No, not all over, but there's areas in the world where these seabirds, where they're doing their business on rocks and in caves, and they do their business, and they leave, in some places it can be, 20 meters thick of, centuries of guano. And it's harvested. And look at this one right here. Now this one here is from Southeast Asia. Now this one here comes from a wetter area. Over centuries it can leach out some of the nitrogen, but in the process of leaching out, it's creating a humus, which is centuries to produce this humic acid, which is important. Humic acid, whoa, it's hard to get. What it does to a plant, whoa, humic acid. So that's the number one, as well as the nutrient content. It's this one here has 13% nitrogen. 13%, like, just you don't find that stuff. But we get this one from Southeast Asia for because of the humic acid content. Now you can get it. We like to get it from drier areas like Peru, where you do not have the leachate, right? Where you get it, where rains get on there and leaches the nutrients out. In desert conditions, it stays there, and it's just potent. But the nitrogen, the nutrients in organics, they're locked up in complex forms. Now, complex forms means that the element, nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, they're tied up with other elements. And what that does is it allows it to be stable in the ground. You put it in the ground, it'll stay there. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is in the north, the ground is negatively charged, and in the south, it is positively charged. The ground, the earth, the dirt. And elements, if you remember from high school or junior high school, in school, you remember the elemental chart. Now there's, 104 elements on the chart, and they all have their charge. You'll read it, there's double positives, double negatives, negatives, positives, but nitrogen, when it's in a complex form, you're looking for it in a positive charge, right? Now, urate is a common source of nitrogen in guanos, and ammonium oxalate. That is one of the major sources of nitrogen in Seabird guano, which is positively charged. So when you put that in soil, as that ammonium source breaks down, right, it's positive. It's still held on the soil. It breaks down so that the plant can pull it, right? Once it becomes broken down, then the plant can grab the element of nitrogen, take it up into the plant. And it stays there because it's positive, and the ground here is negative, so it leaches on. Some forms of nitrogen, like when you get the chemically produced stuff like urea, where it converts ammonia into nitrate. Nitrate is negatively charged. It's a source of ammonia, but it's negative. So every time you water your plant or every time it rains, it just goes down into the water table. It's gone. Now maybe the big trees in the forest can go down there and get it, but your little plant ain't gonna go get the nitrate when it's down, 30 meters underground ain't going to get it. So that's what the benefit of getting nitrogen in organic form. But it goes the same with the phosphorus, the potash. It's all the same. It's complex, and it's going to stay there, and slowly the plant pulls it off. Now this one, let's look at this one here. This is bat guano. Now this is from the Philippines. Now this one has a very low nitrogen in it because they're eating, they're eating fruits, right? These guys are fruit-eating bats. But what they have is this phosphorus, like high concentrations of phosphorus, which, you know, a lot of industries, they want it to phosphorus because it promotes budding and blooming, and they want phosphorus. So that's the popular with this one, right? And it is a stable phosphorus. It's stable. Now, phosphorus, when you're feeding it from a chemical source of phosphorus, they use acid to extract the phosphorus from rock. And what that stuff does is when you put that on the ground, over time it fries the ground. It'll kill bacteria. And you in California, where there's a lot of high intensive agriculture, there's studies showing that the ground there is just dead. I mean, it's kind of growing plants. As long as you're feeding the hell out of it with fertilizer, you know what I mean, the plants will grow. But the higher and higher percentage of it just get washed away because there's nothing in there to hold it into the ground. So they just keep dumping it on, and the ground starts to become dead. It's just dead. And in the plants that they feed these chemical sources of phosphorus, analysis of the tissue, they're finding elemental phosphorus in the actual plant itself, where it sits there in the, you know, the water of the tissue. The plant pulls up the elemental phosphorus, and it's staying inside the actual tissue as elemental phosphorus. But phosphorus is a major requirement for the energy of the plant, to photosynthesis, to create complex carbohydrates. You need phosphorus. But if it just sits there in elemental form and does not start to combine to make complex carbohydrates and fats and proteins, it doesn't do anything. And this is what the studies are finding. They're finding elemental phosphorus. Now, elemental phosphorus, surprisingly, it's a semi-fire suppressant. So certain crops, you don't want to have a product that doesn't burn, or doesn't burn well. And that's what happens with the chemicals. So there's the difference there. That's why there's a market for fruit-eating bat guano and fruit-eating bats, different parts of the world and different aspects to every guano from every different cave or every different part of the world. So that's why we have to do so many flavors here, or try to get flavors, and it's very difficult to get. I mean, picture this stuff. There's just not sitting on the side of a highway in Borneo, you know what I mean? It just ain't there. You got to get the logistics and to get this stuff, and there's massive government regulations, even on the most third world banana republic. There's regulations on cave. They can be sensitive, so they are very controlled, and when you can get it and how you get it. But basically, it's physical. You got to go in there and physically hoist it up ropes, get it out of these caves. It's expensive. It's time consuming, and then you're humping this stuff through jungles to the nearest road. It's difficult, which adds to the expense. But the potency, the benefits well outweigh the expense. I mean, I can't say enough. You can look at it and you go, holy smokes, the price. I mean, I'd be better pitching, lobster under my plants. It'd be cheaper. It's just what these products can do for people that have crops that they're that concerned with, or that has that much value. You know what I mean? You will not believe what guanos will do compared to chemical fertilizers. Okay, now here we go. Now this one is from Mexico. This is Mexican bats up in northern Mexico, where they eat insects. Now, all sources of organic nitrogen comes from protein. Insects hair is protein, insect shell is protein. Now, this insect shell is hard to digest. It's a lot of complex proteins in there. It's hard to digest. So a lot of that stuff comes out in the excreta. It ends up in the guano. Now, high nitrogen. You can get guano from insect-eating bats can be as high as 13%. Now that is just like crazy amounts, and it's extremely stable. It's locked up in protein. So the protein has to break down to convert to nitrogen where the plant can take it. So there's a whole new show on that one, but it's just so you understand that lot of nitrogen in that one, right? But it's very slow release, and people don't understand. They're looking at a bag of fertilizer at a garden department, and they see, holy smokes, this is 30% nitrogen and it's $5, and it's a bag that big. Well, holy smokes. Then they look at this little thing of guano and they go, holy smokes, lobster's cheaper than that. Like, I don't get it. There's 13% versus 30% in a sack, and I'm going to go with the big one. No, it doesn't work that way. A plant needs very little, really, to get rocking and rolling. Very little. And what you see in that big bag, very little will really be used by the plant. It looks good. It looks good when you're buying it, but it is never going to be used. It is negatively charged. It is unstable. It is just going to go away in the form. It's going to, half the nitrogen is volatile. It's going to disappear in the air as ammonia, or it's going to just disappear in the ground table and just build up the ground level of nitrates, right? It's just not. That's why you have to put so much on, because such a little percent will be used. In guanos, virtually 100% is going to be available to that plant. 100%. That plant's going to eat it all that you see here over time, and it adds life. Chemical fertilizers are going to just burn the bacteria, and bacteria is life. You need to keep converting everything over where the plant can take it into that root. It needs life, and bacteria is critical. This stuff is alive. It just generates life. But back to this Mexican guano. It contains the protein, the shell. The little shell of a little beetle it's almost like a body of a car. Well, it contains a very complex, I call it a complex protein, but it's actually a glucosamine, polyacrylic glucosamine complex protein. And what that stuff does, they're just beginning to get research going on what that stuff does, but it's an amazing product on its own. And what chitosan does is, and they don't know how exactly, but it has a growth factor that it just makes everything rock and roll inside that plant, and it just makes the plants take off. And they aren't sure why, so they're already starting to refine that product out of shrimp shell to start putting it into agriculture as a refined, rather than same old deal. Commercial agriculture, you can't be roaming around with armfuls of bug shells, and it's got to go into a feeder, a hopper, and be. So they concentrate it, which you'll always lose a lot of the benefits when you process it. But it also is a disease inhibitor and a pesticide, for that matter. They're pretty confident that chitosan is going to be the next wave of organic pesticides. Now, chitosan, when the plant can take it up, in the plant itself, it creates these roots that actually kill nematodes. There's bad nematodes and good ones. It only kills the bad ones, and it leaves the good ones. Like, how do you figure that one out? Now, that is loaded in insect-eating guano, right? So that is a major reason for that one. But all these flavors, and there's lots of flavors of guano, and it's what kind of cave they come out of, what country they come out of. Do they get rain? Do they get drought? Do they eat bananas? Do they eat papayas? Everything affects what is in there. It is very complex. Some things have more of another than another, but some don't have everything. So there's a reason why you sell flavors of guano. But I cannot emphasize enough, if you are concerned about your crops or your plants or whatever, get more educated on the benefits of guano. It is well worth the money, even though a lot of times it can scare you when you look at the price. It is just, you will never regret investing in a bit of guano. Now, I would just like to reiterate again the importance of organic products in soil, how important it is. People just do not grasp the concept of how important this type of product is in the biochemistry of the plant itself and the soil and the molecular biology in the plant. I mean, there's amazing things happen inside a plant. I mean, amazing, to produce fats and proteins and carbohydrates, I mean, from the sun, and nutrients from the ground. It's incredibly complex. And these products, what they do to the biochemistry in the soil and the way they hold the elements, they hold it in there so that the plant can take it. You just do not get that ability in a chemical fertilizer. Chemical fertilizer, you know, I mean, sure, it's like a guy, it's like you feed your kid white bread. Holy smokes, the kid will be bouncing off the walls with energy. He's just like, whoa, look at my kid. He's Superman, right? You're feeding him the food. But after a year of eating white bread, your kid's gonna just go boom. Why? Not everything was there. It's white bread. The nutrition is just shallow calories, right? This guanos, you cannot do better. If you're concerned, spend the extra money. Get guano. And there's a reason this stuff, they've been harvesting this stuff for hundreds of years. Now, like I said before, picture what it takes to get this stuff. Picture where you have to go to get this stuff. And you're still doing it hundreds of years later. We're still getting this stuff. It's just because it does. It does so much. It does so much for plants, for people that are concerned about it. It is just amazing. Buy guano.